which was pretty consistent. Pretty consistently, young people are asking for school to be centered around relationships and around deep learning. Like that is what they want. And it's also what they feel like we don't do enough of in schools at all. The schools aren't structured to meet their needs as human beings. We're not human-centered. And they feel that like in the most intense ways. And to hear that from kids all over the country, different ages, different settings, sort of saying that same thing, I think has in some ways also made it so disheartening to see the policy response, because the policy response that we have seen has only kind of confirmed their feeling, which is that like their humanity is not the center of the conversation ever at all in education in our country when you get to the sort of like macro level decision making.
How do you navigate change? It's a question we think about often, and one that today's world expects us to be comfortable with. The challenge, however, is where do you begin, and how do you develop the mindset and skills to be successful? You're listening to Designing Schools, and I'm your host, Dr. Saba Kidwai, educator, researcher, and storyteller. Join me each week for stories and strategies that bridge the gap between research and practice, as together we explore how might we design schools. In part one of my interview with co-founders of MakeTeamWork, Adam and Larissa, and Boston Public Schools educator Neema Vashia, they share why a culture of trust and psychological safety are essential for designing great teams. One of the most fascinating parts of our conversation was a discussion about masculine and feminine cultures. Did you know that was a thing? I didn't. In a masculine culture, emphasis is placed on competition, achievement, and success. A culture that trickles down into all organizations, including schools. After all, competition, achievement, and success seem like the foundation of our grading system today. In a feminine culture, however, emphasis is placed on quality of life and people. It's the difference between do you live to work or do you work to live? I shared with them how when I visited Finland as part of my doctoral program while at the University of Southern California, I was absolutely fascinated by the culture in Finland. I had heard how famous they were for having a culture of trust in their schools. Yet when I got there, I very quickly realized this was a byproduct of the human-centered values that they held as a society. At their core, they believe their people are their greatest natural resource. As a result, they do whatever it takes to develop them, support them, and create a culture where their people will thrive, grow, and become contributing members of society. The only way to ensure that everyone is able to contribute to finding and solving problems and embracing opportunities is to ensure that everyone has access to a high-quality and equitable education. In Finnish Lessons 2.0, Pasi Sahlberg calls this the Big Finnish Dream. Established in 1963, when the Finnish government decided to choose public education as their best chance to regain economic prosperity after being destroyed by a series of wars. While the world glorifies their PISA scores, to the Finns, a score that holds more significance is the Global Happiness Score, of which they rank number 1, a title that they've held for the past 4 years.
Since you mentioned Finland, I think that it might be then correlation with this masculinity versus femininity. So the level to what extent people in societies compete and to what extent they collaborate. Maybe this is because Scandinavian culture, for instance, is quite feminine. So people choose cars, for instance, because they are safe, not because they are the fastest. This is what I mean. So to what extent it's about well-being, to what extent it's about winning, and success is defined by winning. And I think the Scandinavia is it. Scandinavia, Netherlands, Portugal is a little bit like this too. Yeah, these countries are more collaborative than others, than the US, for instance.
It's no surprise that the US falls under what is considered to be a masculine culture. If you're a leader who's looking to challenge the status quo, I encourage you to explore Adam and Larissa's framework called the Quirky Owl. What is it and why is it called this? Let's find out.
So the Quirky Owl is the leadership program. And what we wanted out of it with this quirky name was exactly to bring this aspect of valuing what's authentic and how to develop an authentic team that would not be A or B. It will be what it will be. So we want the leaders to reflect and acknowledge and be themselves, but also to have the tools to build the environment where people feel that they can bring their best self, share different ideas and perspectives, and give and ask for feedback, because they know that they all want to grow and they know that they need to adapt to changes and they can help each other in that path.
Yeah, and actually, we were testing last year and testing, and we're trying to distill the most important oil of, like the oil of everything that we've done. And we concluded that the ability to build psychologically safe environments, ability to work smoothly with feedback, to create open communication structures in team, to show vulnerabilities, and a little bit of knowledge of agility and how to respond to change. And when people already then realize that not everything needs to be perfect from the beginning, I just need to make everybody feel safe. We need to learn how to manage feedback, how to build stuff together. And then we need to have a little bit of knowledge of what's there, what methods, approaches, and tools are there. And then when it all clicks and start working, so the simple framework just shifts how people think and how people lead teams. So in the end, these like elements of psychological safety, feedback, open communication, structure, and elements of agility and creativity to be there with all the knowledge and also be aware of what science, or organizational science and developmental science brings here to the table. Yeah, so it's an essence. All in all, Quirky Owl is the essence of it. It's like how we tried to simplify everything that we were developing into one fast program, almost like a pipe with fresh water that will just help you get the base and start building your muscle, start developing yourself as a leader. And we concluded that these three elements are absolutely crucial, and that there are millions of topics that you can go. You can go for OKRs as a topic. You can go to elements of culture. You can think about frameworks like Scrum, Kanban, and so on. And it's all important. But these three, in our opinion, they really open people and help them start the path of, yes, and we would love to call it Quirky Owl. So the moment when we accept that everything is ideal, we accept ourselves, we accept others for being who they are, we are able to communicate and bring our perspectives to the table. And we know how we can organize our work in order not to lose efficiency, but gain more engagement and really make all of us happier. That was the idea.
And why the owl, right? There are some aspects that we also discovered about the animal that are linked to our approach. So they're focused on effectiveness. They're very good predators. They can see in the dark. They can move their neck 270. They fight silently. So it's not that you want to do something, you need to create a mass around it. It's amazing how they fly. They can hear very well, and they are designed in a way that they absorb the sound with all their body. They're very precise on the catch, and they're present all around. There are more than 200 types and all around the globe. So we have diversity there.
I can't stress how important this is, having the tools and structures to facilitate these conversations. I love Adam's analogy that these tools will feel like a pipe that's giving you fresh water, breathing new life into your organization. The owl analogy was fascinating. They're focused on effectiveness. They can see in the dark. They can move their neck 270 degrees. They fly silently. They hear very well. I can absolutely see why they chose the owl as their leadership mascot. I want to transition to something really significant that Adam said. When we accept ourselves and each other for who we are, we're not only more productive, we're happier. So this is something that resonates deeply with me. And I believe it's a core part of why we're experiencing the Great Resignation, or as some people are calling it, the Great Renegotiation. Brené Brown recently interviewed America Ferrera on identity and integrated leadership. In the episode, she said, "I can't be the leader I'm meant to be without all the parts of who I am." It's an incredible episode, and if you haven't heard it, I highly recommend it, and I'll link it for you in the show notes. Not being able to bring my whole self to work was one of the many reasons I resigned and left my role with Apple. It's no secret that one of the greatest challenges I faced while being there was not being able to have a personal brand or build a community online. This was something that I was never able to let go of completely, the way in which many other people do. My online presence affords me an incredible community. It's you, without whom, quite frankly, I wouldn't be who I am. It's where I learn, where I connect, where I go to ask questions, and truthfully, it's where I gain the confidence and motivation to lead. I didn't know how to be a leadership executive at Apple without being able to bring my whole self to work. We weren't allowed to have our names or pictures on websites or on the schedule for conference presentations. One time someone did share a picture of me, and it was an accident. We had it resolved. However, it led to a meeting where one of my managers said they should want Apple, not Saba. If anyone has the answer to compartmentalizing yourself, do let me know. I asked Adam and Larissa to share, why is it the exception and not the norm to have cultures where we can be our authentic selves?
Well, here I would enter therapy topics, but I think that's related. In terms of how we build our culture since we are small, and how do we get different responses in what's correct, what's not, what is the very nice and lovely Larissa that everyone loves. You know, she's a great friend, she's a good leader. And we start building ourselves and our personalities around what we understood that is very much valued. And somehow we keep a distance from what we actually feel and how we behave in this authentic part, because we understood that this is the ideal mask. So we could keep on going with that. So I think it's difficult to access this in us and also to connect with others, because usually this is what we show, what we are expected to be, and the great citizen, the great leader, the great teacher. So allowing yourself to be and to connect with others. So I believe that the greatest present you can give to someone is to be present, to just be there, to listen, to don't judge, don't conclude, be there and perceive. Because our tendency to also start concluding and thinking about what will I answer next, because I want to keep that pulse, doesn't allow us to connect deeper.
Yeah, I think we try to be accepted. We try to be accepted quite often, and we learn throughout domestication that acceptance come, I don't know, depending on culture, from obedience, from being sometimes from, but no, not really often, I would say, from being yourself might also come like the acceptance. But more often than not, it's about living somebody's dreams or somebody's lives or somebody's framework, not yourself. And at a certain moment, you just realize, wow, it's really hard to say what I would like in this situation, because normally all my friends will do this, my parents will do this, my cousins and brothers will do this. And yeah, and who am I really in this situation? And I think it's an issue, it's a challenge for all of us, even if we are aware that the culture works this way, that we have certain beliefs that are with us almost from the beginning or from our entire upbringing process. It's just how it's constructed. Education doesn't really put certain framework to the culture, and thanks from this framework we trust one another, we understand one another, and so on. But this framework doesn't really promote us to be ourselves. It's more promoting us as kind of an image of a citizen that others and maybe us would like to see. But is it who we are? I'm not sure.
As they highlight, this is a challenge that we experience early on. The lack of time and space to develop the self-awareness to answer, who am I? I think Joe Arpelding says it best. He says we need to stop telling kids what's wrong with you and start telling them what's strong with you. A challenge in our schools is that ultimately we don't create the time and space for young people to develop and discover their authentic selves. As a result, we grow up doing what we think we should be doing versus exploring our strengths and what success and happiness mean to us. From the ideal GPA to the ideal path after high school to how many sports we should be in to how many clubs we're in, we've predefined who young people should be without giving them the agency, the time and space to explore who they are. Changing this approach is something that many are advocating for in our schools. They call it taking a whole child approach to learning, where we're not just looking at academics, we're looking at the full scope of how we grow and develop, from our social, emotional, cognitive, and academic development, as well as the physical and mental health of a child. There are many who advocate for this approach, and I'm going to link to an incredible article written by Devin Vodichka. He's an award-winning superintendent and the CEO of the Learner-Centered Collaborative. He wrote this article with a few others, and it's titled, "Why Now is the Time for Learner-Centered Whole Child Education." In this article, the authors caution against a return to normal after the pandemic and encourage us to expand our view of success to include knowledge, habits, and social and emotional life skills, and add more ways to understand what each child knows and can do. I highly encourage you to explore the work and incredible case studies from the Learner-Centered Collaborative, and I'll link them for you in the show notes. Each example showcases a different type of school environment and proof that the change we wish to see is possible. One of the most powerful practices that emerges when you do this work as a leader with your teams is that you'll see principals do it with their teachers and teachers do it with their students. Adam and Larissa share a strategy you can utilize tomorrow. It's called Start, Stop, Continue. It's a strategy to help begin this dialogue within your organization. But what I love most, and this to me is always a sign of deep knowledge and expertise, is they don't just say do that strategy, they help you do the strategy and then even go a layer deeper.
Yeah, so basically Start, Stop, Continue is one of the frameworks for feedback that we use. And basically after each and every session or whenever you want feedback or whenever you want to offer feedback to somebody, you might use this structure. So for instance, start doing this, stop doing this, and continue doing this. So just not to, it's more or less expressing what we think is needed, what we think should be, replaced or rethought, and what we really like about it. And there are many frameworks, so you can put it from different perspectives. You can use I like, I wish, I wonder, or one thing I really like, and one thing I would still look at it if I were you. And I believe they are all similar in a way. And this is what we observe in teams we work with and in leaders, is that it's very personal. Some people work better with one framework. Some people remember other framework and feel more comfortable with another. And I think it's all worth absolutely testing. And Larry, you want to pop up? I see you have something to add there.
No, I just think that other than just for feedback is a framework that we can use also in retrospective with a team and also for personal reflection. So, for instance, to close the year or to start the year, you can think about what do I want? What's important for me? And in relation to that, what do I need to start doing to get closer to that moment? What do I need to stop doing that is not allowing me to move forward? And what do I acknowledge that is bringing me value and I should state that I need to continue doing? And something that we learned and trained a lot in our masters at Hyper Island is really doing reflections and writing them down and really reflecting what happened and what impacted me to gain the acknowledge, so connect to ourselves or allow the other to see your understanding with a perspective using the framework and then move forward and then adapt. So it's about connecting with the present moment, having the context of what did I learn, where am I now, and where do I want to go? So I believe it's also a great way to start 2022, doing it individually or in a team, or giving it as using the framework to give feedback and ask for feedback, of course.
If there's one takeaway from these episodes with Adam and Larissa, it's the value of ongoing reflection. What did I learn? Where am I now? And where do I want to go? These aren't just ideas they're sharing. Within an incredibly short time, they've amassed a number of case studies, sharing the impact they've had working with teams across a diverse set of organizations. I asked Adam and Larissa to share a few with us, and I'll link them in the show notes for you.
I think the one is very vivid in my memory is our entire many weeks experience with IBM design team when we would be meeting for a weekly session, and practically we're not really planning this session. There was nothing set in stone, but each and every week we would have short retrospective with the team. What is the current need in the team? And then we would be designing the next session about the current need. And this way it somehow shifted from traditional learning program where you offer something and then deliver it to the learning program of a true contextual relevance for the team. And I think, this would be the project that I have in mind still very vividly.
It came to my mind the agility and creativity program, because it was a 3 days program that we designed in a way that it was very experimental. So it had input, exercises, teamwork, reflection. And in the course of 3 days, they were able to kick off reflecting on their pains. What were their fears in relation to which one of the topics? I'm not creative. I have no idea what agility is, and the workplace expects me to do that. So really connecting with their need and pain and creating a safe space within that group. Okay, these are our stinky fishes that if we don't share, they will keep getting worse and worse and more stinky. And through the process, all the experimentation and all the exercises allowed them to gain confidence on the topic and be able to close the 3 days experience having a very personal understanding of what is creativity and what is agility for each one of them, and having the tools to apply in their many different workplaces, and allowing the tools to help them move forward without the fear that they had from the beginning. Oh, I don't know how to do that. I'm not creative. I'm not an agile coach. So I believe that this is one close to my heart.
Yeah, I also like this one very much, especially because of the creative sequence that we developed for the teams, the creative sequence that we used many times later on in order to include introverts in teams also. So part of the creative sequence that we developed actually is a silent sequence. So therefore, all the introverts and less outspoken people have time to think about their ideas, to structure their ideas, and then they are ensured the space to share their ideas. We spotted that the tweaks that we designed in the sequence really work, and they shorten the alignment time. I mean, the time that the teams need to align and take ownership of an idea at the table. So I think
build on each other's ideas as well.
And we used it many times after. And I like this project that Larissa mentioned, especially because of this sequence that I saw it many times. That usually the room are dominated by extroverts or generally are dominated by extroverts, and we need to leave more space for everybody, more inclusive, and bring all these great observants to the table and all their perspectives and then build together on it. Yeah?
One of the greatest outcomes of facilitating conversations is designing with people in your organization. Adam shares this fluid design as a highlight from his time working with IBM. So often we feel overwhelmed because we feel like a few members of the leadership team have to go behind closed doors and design an entire plan and then come back and tell everybody what it's going to be. However, when we design with people, When we facilitate conversations, we're able to discover challenges in real time, respond effectively, build cultures that are inclusive, where people feel safe and that their ideas are wanting to be heard and are valued. I love how in Larissa's example, the team gained a deeper confidence and understanding of creativity. So often when we use these words, we fail to discuss what they mean to us and our organization. What does this look like? How will we measure success? And how will we give people the support and agency to develop these skills? If you listen to part 1, you'll remember Neema, an educator who early on in the pandemic designed what learning should look like with her students. She has a case study of her own. She took the exercise one step further and worked with 2 research professors, Jel Mehta and Justin Reich, on a project called Imagine September. I asked her to share more about this project and how you can access this resource.
So Justin and Jel had initially invited me to be part of a charrette that they did in the spring of that first pandemic school year, kind of just to understand better, like what was going on with educators, what were they thinking? And as I had never done a design charrette before, period, I don't think, and certainly not with them. But as I was doing it with them, like I immediately was like, I need to do this with students. Like it just was like, there's a very natural corollary. So I remember like private messaging Justin in the Zoom chat and being like, can we figure out like how to make this happen with kids? Because we need it. And he was like, sure, let's try it. So we designed like a design power hour that we decided to try with students. And we did it with like a small group of 10 students. And we asked them the same questions that he and Jel had asked to adults, just to like see how they would respond to them. And one thing that was really fascinating is when we were asking about like what they would want to be different in school in September, something that surfaced was like a lot of kids' preoccupations were about longstanding inequity. Like it wasn't like young people were only focused on like, here are the things we've learned during the pandemic, or here's what we want to change related to the pandemic. Young people were talking about like, here's how school hasn't worked for me ever. Here are the things that need to change about school. Like when we're thinking about going back to it, like, I don't want just changes related to the pandemic. I want changes that make my experience better no matter what. And the more they talked, the more I was like, I started to get really curious about like, would this be true if we asked kids in different places? Would it be true of different ages? Like, what would we hear from young people? Would there be themes that sort of emerged? And so we decided to sort of codify those questions and share them with people and see what happened. And I mean, it was pretty amazing. I think we had several hundred teachers run this design power hour with their students and share back like what they were hearing, which was pretty consistent. Pretty consistently, young people are asking for school to be centered around relationships and around deep learning. Like that is what they want. And it's also what they feel like we don't do enough of in schools at all. That schools aren't structured to meet their needs as human beings. We're not human-centered. And they feel that like in the most intense ways. And to hear that from kids all over the country, different ages, different settings, sort of saying that same thing, I think has in some ways also made it so disheartening to see the policy response, because the policy response that we have seen has only kind of confirmed their feeling, which is that like their humanity is not the center of the conversation ever at all in education in our country when you get to the sort of like macro level decision making.
We've invested heavily in technology, and rightly so. However, access to technology is step 1. Neema isn't alone in documenting that today's young people have one ask: deeper relationships. A few months ago, Devin Vadichka, an award-winning superintendent and CEO at the Learner-Centered Collaborative, along with researcher Kristen Gagnère, director of the Learning Sciences Institute at Johns Hopkins, and myself, published an article about the science of prioritizing relationships with your students. I'll link it in the show notes for you. In the article we share, when we listen to our students, they tell us that they want to be engaged in learning, connected to school, motivated to learn, and persist amidst challenges. They want to feel connected to their teachers, peers, and to their learning environment. Unfortunately, our students have also been telling us, as Neema confirmed, that their experience does not match their aspirations. Sociologist Paul Atwell also highlights the challenge of focusing on technology alone through his research. About 2 decades ago, in 2001, he emphasized that placing computers in the hands of every student is not a solution, because the challenge, he said, lies in addressing the digital use divide, what he defines as being able to change the tasks that students are doing when they're provided with the technology. Design thinking is an approach that can provide the strategies and tools needed to help schools redesign their environments, and more importantly, the tasks that students are being asked to do so that they can enhance and develop the skills and mindsets that will allow them to thrive in today's world. I asked Neema what advice she would give today's leaders in designing human-centered environments that have a focus on relationships.
It's so interesting because I do think the investment in technology is kind of mind-blowing when you think about it, right? Like people have really poured so many resources into that. And yet, like, I think it's the wrong driver. Like, I think the driver is relationships. I think sometimes technology can support relationships. Sometimes. I think sometimes technology impedes relationships. A lot of drama happens on people's phones that then comes to school with them and does not improve their relationships with anyone, right? So it's like technology is a tool, but it's not the end. The end that you're seeking is relationships. And sometimes a screen and a device are going to get you further in that direction. And sometimes they're not. And so I guess what I would say is I hope that when people are thinking about investing in technology, it's like not an abstract investment. It's like, do I have a clear vision for how this supports the building of relationships? And if I don't, then I wouldn't buy it. Or I wouldn't say like, this is my silver bullet, because it's not the silver bullet. And I think it sometimes gets cast that way, that like it's going to solve. And it's like, no, it doesn't solve. Like the value of relationships, like is your school system and your school, are they structured to support relationship building? Are we thinking about the schedule? Are we thinking about staffing? Are we thinking about class sizes? Are we thinking about the way in which young people move through a building and like experience that building? Like, is relationship building at the center of all of that? Then you're going to find the spaces where technology plugs in to support that. But if it's like, I'm going to get every kid a device and think that's going to build relationships, it's not, it won't. And so I think the sort of values and the vision behind the investment are really important. And I think we moved really fast, again, because we had to, because it was like everyone went home and then we had to figure out how we're going to stay connected to them. But I do think there's an important moment now to be like, well, we made that really big investment, but what's the underpinning? And like, if it's not there, how do we go back a couple steps now and think about what the foundation of relationship building is underneath all of that? I have really changed a lot as a teacher because of this experience. I have slowed way down. I have really, really taken time to like invest in structures in my classroom that are strictly about relationship building, about listening to young people. Like, I think there are some people who would look at me as a teacher now and be like, this is one. I think former students would be like, who is this lady? Like, what happened? I used to move really fast. Like, came into this profession in 2003 and like, like urgency and no excuses, like all that permeated the air that I was breathing when I became a teacher. And I feel like during the pandemic, I spent a lot of time unlearning a lot of that and really starting to ask hard questions of myself about the why behind all of that and who did it support and who did it exclude, and right, who was positively impacted, who was negatively impacted, and really kind of came to some conclusions that it was hurting the most vulnerable young people. Like that way of teaching worked for some kids, but it didn't work for the kids who needed it to work the most. So we circle every week in my class. Once a week, one period every week is about being in circle. And it's about me not being in charge. Young people lead the circles. They come up with the questions and really taking the hierarchy out of the room and just spending time on relationship building and on listening to young people and on letting that listening be the thing that drives sort of how I think about my teaching and learning. That's a huge shift and it's working really well. But I think, in a context where accountability in the form of like test scores is the driver, it is definitely, I feel like I've sort of stepped out of the stream a little bit and I'm sort of making conscious choices of about what I think are the right things to do, but are certainly not the things that are being messaged as the right things to do. And it feels good. Like my ethnic studies class is super grounded in relationships. It's really grounded in like spending a lot of time thinking about your identity. It's spent like thinking about the relationship between your identity and the society we live in. Like, I think all those choices are the right choices to make right now. I don't necessarily feel like they're structurally supported choices. So I feel good about what's happening in my room, but I am mindful that it's not like institutionally supported in a sense, right? It's like we're doing this thing because we feel like it's the right thing to do here. I wish it was happening more in other places.
And I think that's what I love about how you advocate for what you're doing and how you share what you're doing. Like I never would have even known what was happening in your classroom had like you not written that article or how you not shared those questions. So I think that's such a huge part of what I love about the work you do is the way in which you just so vulnerably share, but also in a way that's so empowering that if I wanted to do it tomorrow, I feel like you've given me what I need to be able to experiment with that idea as well as you have so beautifully done in our very short time together today too. So I'm curious to kind of hear from you a little bit. You hear so much about the Great Resignation and more people want flexibility. More people are thinking about the type of lifestyles they want. Yet it almost seems like educators and administrators have been completely excluded as if the education industry like can't even possibly like respond to something like this. Yet so many people are making the choice to actively leave or are actively questioning, is this something I really want to continue doing? Because is it in alignment with these things that now I feel like I've been exposed to as the whole world has and also want? I'm curious to hear your thoughts about like, you know, how we're going to have to move forward, given that is the dynamic in which I think we live in.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, I think. You know, I'm actually not teaching full-time this year. I made the decision that like I needed to take a step back in order to be able to take care of kids better. I also had to take care of myself better. And so I start teaching at 11 o'clock every day. And in the mornings, I'm like writing and I'm consulting on different things. I'm trying different things. I'm like trying to work my brain in different ways. But I felt like I couldn't imagine re-entering in-person school at the like pace that we were doing it pre-pandemic. I couldn't imagine it. Like it just the level of inhumanity of what we ask people to do in school buildings every day. It's like, it makes me kind of ill to my stomach. And I literally couldn't figure out how I was going to do that. And I sort of felt like I either am going to quit or I have to take a step back. And I'm lucky that my principal was like, I'll let you take a step back. I don't think everyone has that ability. School is very all or nothing. We have created spaces where like you're literally asking people to be superhumans and like leave everything of themselves in the classroom in order to be quote effective, or like you're just not supposed to do it. And like, it's just like, this isn't sustainable. And it's hard because I think there are some forces at play who would be really glad to see a great resignation among teachers, because you could take a lot of highly skilled people and replace them with very unskilled people who are cheaper. And so I'm not sure there's like a huge investment in keeping people. And I don't think that people are thinking like long-term about what the ramifications of that might be. And it worries me because I watch in my school building every day, like teachers who I love and respect and have worked with for a long time say to me, like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And it would be such a loss. You know, you have educators who have poured their entire lives into this, and the fact that we can't figure out structurally how to give people a little bit more space, it's really heartbreaking. Like this year in my school district, I've been advocating really hard for like, can we get folks a half day a month? Like a half day a month where kids go home and teachers have time to work. I can't get that. Like people are giving up every P&D to cover for absent teachers. There's staffing shortages left and right. I'm like, we can't even give people a half day once a month. Like that level of inflexibility. Like it feels like we're playing chicken right now. Right. And it's like, I don't know that the system's going to blink. And I feel really, really worried about what that's going to mean for young people walking into school buildings next year. There's also not some massive surge of people trying to become teachers. Like I've been reading about teacher prep programs where they can't fill seats, right? So like who's going to be in these classrooms if we don't take care of educators? Who's going to be teaching our young people? There might not be anyone to teach them, or there might not be enough people. So I feel like school districts and systems have to figure it out, but I also feel like there is not a lot of energy around figuring it out right now. And I don't know what people are thinking is going to happen, but it is really, really concerning.
As Eric Brynjolfsson says in one of my all-time favorite TED Talks, technology is not destiny. We shape our destiny. Education, like many industries, is at a crossroads. The decisions we make in this moment will define who we are, the generations we're preparing, and more. I asked Adam and Larissa to share advice for education leaders on how they can design great teams that can design schools that meet the needs of today's learners.
I think that number one is to create an environment where people feel confident and comfortable to share their doubts, their questions, and their perspectives. So they have the drive to ask and to give feedback because they know that this is the way to move forward. They know that their input, even if the course is finishing, there will be someone else here in the next crew and the next cohort. And I believe there's also room for more reflection, individual and shared reflection with students, and somehow ownership over the process of learning. So for instance, after a module or after a new content, invite students to reflect on what did I learn that impacted me? And it will be different for each one of us. And how can I use this learning? So I acknowledge that, but how is it in my day-to-day life and how will I use it? And what else do I need or I want to learn? Do I want to learn more about this topic or this topic sparked on me something else? And kind of gain the ownership and have this open conversation with their tutors, with their teachers, and also colleagues in terms of this is what drives me. I think it will allow students to be more interested in general about their learnings and what comes next.
Yeah, with all these changes and with everything that is going on right now around the globe, I would say be strong and keep experimenting. It's super tough situation. And somehow with all these changes, we just need to stay relevant to our students. So for the way how we try to stay as relevant as possible is building on feedback, trying to capture challenges that our students have out there and build on them. Designing for them is the key. But and saying this, I know that it's super hard. So I wish that we all keep healthy, keep strong, and just go forward and keep experimenting because we all have still a lot to do.
Well, for more open and kind of guided and facilitated discussions like this, I would love to invite everyone to join the MakeTeamWork Lab. That's what we do. We try to design based on the participants' needs and create the environment where they can learn from each other. And I believe that there's room for many other initiatives. And so we would be happy to inspire more people to take such communities forward and build value around what people actually need. So listening and designing based on needs.
Their response brings us full circle to what they began with. Create a culture of safety for people to express their ideas, concerns, questions, and fears. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. This is a topic that's really near and dear to not only myself, but the many guests who come on the podcast. We have an incredible network of people who are interested in speaking about this further, interested in sharing their experiences and best practices if it's something you're interested in exploring as well. It's your turn to join the conversation by sharing what you enjoyed or what questions you have. In a world where time and attention are so valuable, thank you for choosing to listen and for being a part of our Designing Schools community. Leaving a review for the podcast helps others learn about the show, giving them the gift of knowledge and allowing this community to help create access and exposure to ideas and opportunities others may not even know exist.